afraid of the dark.
Today's story tells of a hero immersed in the nocturnal ambience of a deserted highway, finding himself trapped between graves and an entity haunting him in the darkness. Desperate pursuits, peculiar encounters, and enigmatic events make this psychological thriller gripping and incredibly tense. Let's begin. Night. I feel like I've been driving for eternity. For the past 3 hours, I haven't seen a single gas station, a single car, or any inhabited place. My fuel is running out. The phone signal disappeared 2 hours ago. The situation is complicated, and on top of that, my eyes are getting heavy and I'm very sleepy. It's all fatigue in the monotonous road, with impassable thickets on both sides. Ahead, there's only an empty and endless highway. I don't know where I am. The old paper map couldn't help much. My head just refused to think. I needed to sleep. After driving a few more kilometers, I saw a sign indicating that ahead of me awaited a place with a strange, unfamiliar name, Niloye. I thought to myself, I'd rather spend the night there than stay on the highway surrounded by a creepy forest. After a few kilometers beyond the sign, I turned onto an old road that led to that same village. I don't know exactly how much I drove until the moment when the car ran out of fuel completely. There were no more options. I had to walk. I didn't want to go back to the highway, especially since I hadn't seen a single car on it for the past 3 hours. It would be foolish to wait for a miracle or to stay in the car and freeze until morning. I'd better try to find a village. If I'm lucky, they'll let me stay overnight, I thought, taking an empty gas canister and all the essentials. I set off further down the road on foot. It was dark, and only the faint light of the lighter illuminated the road ahead of me. Unfortunately, I didn't have a flashlight, so I had to walk almost blindly. Occasionally, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed some silhouettes, but I immediately dismissed them as fatigue and tried not to pay attention. I walked about 300 meters and then stumbled upon an old fence. Had I finally arrived? Visibility was still 0, so I couldn't see what was beyond the fence. I wanted to find someone alive as soon as possible. I needed help more than ever. After climbing over the broken fences, I headed into the darkness in the direction where I thought there should be a house. 10 meters were enough for me to be completely convinced that this was not a village. And the fact that I was in complete darkness, alone, in the middle of an abandoned cemetery didn't help. The graves were unkempt, some crosses simply lay on the ground. Perhaps I stumbled upon a village cemetery. The conclusion was one: I was still on the right track, and somewhere nearby should be that same village with the creepy name Niloye. Suddenly, some crackling came from the darkness. I froze, listening to every rustle. A strange feeling that someone was watching me hadn't left me since I left the car. From time to time, I had to extinguish the lighter because it became unbearably hot, and it needed time to cool down before I could light it again. During this interval, I remained in complete darkness, standing in one place, listening to every rustle. I don't even know what scared me more, the creepy noises or the graveyard silence. I stood still for about a minute. The lighter had cooled down a bit, and I could light it again. I raised it in front of me, and perhaps out of strong excitement, I dropped it from my trembling hands. After putting the empty canister down, I immediately fell to my knees and began frantically searching for the lighter. The ground was cold, but I could feel the moisture on the fallen leaves. With one hand, I finally found it, but with the other, I felt something resembling a horse's hoof. For some reason, I was sure it wasn't a horse. A wild horror ran through my body, and I fell backward. I lit the lighter in front of me again. The dim light illuminated a small area around me. Where I had just touched the hoof, there was nothing there. How could this be? Getting up, I took the canister and headed in the direction from which I came. After about 3 minutes, I realized that I was only going deeper, and there was no way out nearby. The cemetery seemed endless, just like in a nightmare. Maybe such a huge burial ground could. The crackling sound echoed again. Something had been watching me the whole time, as if studying me. It was unsettling. I realized that I was surrounded by graves, and I wasn't alone here. Whatever it was, it could see me, but I couldn't see it. Once again, I turned off the light, stopping to let the lighter cool down. At that moment, I heard the sound of hooves. Something was heading towards me. I froze in anticipation of the unknown. My heart was pounding faster and faster. Whatever it was very close. When I lit the lighter again, what I saw stunned me for a moment. Before me stood something terrifying, with large fangs and horns. It stared into my eyes, grinning. I screamed. I don't remember how I forced myself to run, but I ran as fast as I could, stumbling over graves in the darkness. Despite falling several times, I kept getting up and running until I heard the sound of hooves behind me. They had always been there, constantly nearby. At one point, I felt a sharp pain in my face and fell, as if someone had hit me with a bat. I don't know how to describe that pain, but it seemed insignificant compared to the creature chasing me. I got up and immediately discovered the cause. It was a tombstone that I simply hadn't noticed in the darkness, just 5 meters away from me. I heard the pounding again and didn't wait for it to catch up to me. I ran again. Soon I reached the fence, and in one motion, leaped over it, running a few more meters. I heard an inhuman howl. The creature no longer pursued me, but I still tried to get as far away from the cemetery as possible. It was already early morning when I reached the road. I didn't know which way to go and headed in the direction away from the graves. After walking about 400 meters, I finally reached a village. I knocked on the first house, and an old man, holding a weapon, opened it. But upon seeing me, he immediately hid it. I thought it was the unclean, he muttered, inviting me in and offering me tea. After hearing about my nighttime adventure, he said I was very lucky to be alive. The unclean had already taken half the village, which is why the cemetery was so large. It only appeared at night, and no one had seen it during the day. After resting for a while, the old man and I went to look for my gas canisters. He happened to have a barrel of fuel, so I was incredibly lucky, as the nearest gas station was not close. As we passed among the graves, I noticed the dates and realized that many young people were buried there. The old man said they hadn't been able to protect the youth, they were too curious. We've been living here for many years, he said. The village is secluded, and nobody has any business with us anymore. There are few of us left, and I don't want to leave, he added. After a few hours, I was back on the road, driving further, almost forgetting everything like a bad dream. But involuntarily glancing in the rearview mirror, I was stunned. Sitting behind me was that same creature,